The room is silent. The funeral was weeks ago. The flowers have wilted. The casseroles are gone, and you are sitting there in the deafening quiet, staring at a wall, wondering if this is it. If the person who knew you better than anyone else in the world is just deleted, gone. But then something happens. A smell, a flicker, a sudden, sharp intake of breath. It's tiny. If you blinked, you would have missed it. Most people call these coincidences. They brush them off as grief, or wishful thinking, or the brain misfiring under stress. But what if they aren't? What if the silence isn't actually empty? For centuries, across every single civilization on Earth, from the ancient Egyptians to modern quantum physicists, there has been a persistent theory. The idea is that the connection between two human beings, that electric chemical bond we call love, doesn't just evaporate when the heart stops beating. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It only changes form. Today, we aren't just looking at ghost stories. We are deep diving into the specific, recurring patterns that millions of people report after a loss. These are the signs from heaven you didn't notice. The subtle, microscopic interventions that suggest you aren't just lucky. You are being protected. Let's start with the architecture of the connection itself. Researchers call this ADC, after-death communication. It sounds clinical, but the reality is messy and emotional. When you lose someone, the landscape of your life changes. It's like a bomb went off. The dust is everywhere, and in that dust, the skeptics will tell you that your brain is just looking for patterns to soothe the pain. And they might be right. But here is the catch. The patterns are identical. Whether you are a CEO in New York or a farmer in rural Vietnam, the contact follows the same rules. It's rarely a booming voice from the sky. It is subtle. It's granular. It requires you to be paying attention. It's a postcard from heaven. And the first way it arrives is when your defenses are down. Sleep. We need to talk about the difference between a grief dream and a visitation, because they are not the same thing. A normal dream is a neurological garbage truck. Your brain is sorting through the stress of the day. The imagery is chaotic. The colors are muddy. You wake up confused, with the memory fading like mist. A visitation is different. It is hyper-real. People who experience this describe it as more real than reality. The colors are technicolor. The sensory details are sharp. You can see the stitching on their shirt, the light in their eyes. In these moments, the deceased never looks sick. They don't look like they did in the hospital. They appear radiant, whole. And the communication is telepathic. There is rarely a long conversation. It's usually a transfer of pure feeling, a download of information that says, "I am okay." Take the case of a woman we'll call Sarah. Sarah was drowning in depression after her grandfather died. She couldn't function. One night, the scene shifted. She wasn't just dreaming. She was there, sitting on a porch swing. The wood grain felt rough under her hand. The air smelled like rain. Her grandfather walked out, holding 2 glasses of iced tea. No words, just a hand squeeze. When Sarah woke up, the grief didn't vanish, but the heaviness, the crushing weight on her chest, was gone. That is the marker. If you wake up from a dream of a loved one and feel physically lighter, that wasn't your subconscious playing tricks. That was a meeting. But sometimes the sign bypasses the visual cortex entirely and goes straight for the most primal part of your brain, the olfactory bulb. Smell. This is the only sense we have that is hardwired directly into the brain's emotional center, the amygdala. It doesn't pass through the logic filters. It hits you instantly. This is known as clairolfactance. Here is the scenario. You are alone in your house. The windows are sealed shut. It is winter. Suddenly, you are hit with a wall of scent, not a drift. A wall. It smells like fresh-cut roses, or maybe it's the specific brand of pipe tobacco your father smoked in 1995, or the distinct chemical smell of motor oil and sawdust. It appears out of nowhere, lingers for 30 seconds, just long enough for you to recognize it, and then vanishes completely. Consider James. His wife, Maria, grew roses for 50 years. After she died, the house was sterile. No flowers, just grief. Then, one Tuesday, the living room filled with the scent of blooming roses. Heavy, sweet, undeniable. James checked the vents. He checked outside. Nothing. The skeptics will say this is an olfactory hallucination, a memory firing. But for James, that was a signature. It takes massive amounts of energy to manifest physically, but scent is molecular. It's subtle. It is the easiest way for a spirit to say, I'm still in the room. And speaking of being in the room, let's talk about thermodynamics. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and it feels heavy? Or you feel like someone is standing right behind you, but you turn around and nobody is there? That isn't paranoia. That is atmospheric displacement. The theory is that spirits are beings of high-frequency energy. When that energy enters our dense, physical plane, it displaces the air. It changes the temperature. This is why people report sudden, isolated cold spots. It's like standing next to an open refrigerator in the middle of a sauna, but it can go the other way too. A sudden enveloping warmth, a spiritual hug. There is a documented phenomenon where people sorting through a deceased loved one's belongings, holding a shirt, looking at a photo, will suddenly feel a physical sensation on their body. A hand on the shoulder, a brush against the cheek, a warmth spreading down the back. Your brain tries to rationalize it. It's a draft. It's my nerves. But your heart knows the difference between a draft and a touch. A draft makes you shiver. A touch makes you cry. Then we move from the biological to the electrical. If we accept the premise that the soul is energy, then it makes perfect sense that they would manipulate the energy grid around us. We are surrounded by currents, lights, Wi-Fi, radio waves. It is the perfect playground for communication. We aren't talking about a light bulb burning out. We are talking about manipulation. The lamp that flickers rhythmically only when you are talking about your mom. The TV that turns itself on at 3 o'clock a.m. But the most common, and perhaps the most heartbreakingly beautiful version of this, is the algorithm. Music. You are driving. You are at your breaking point. You are screaming at the universe, asking for a sign. You turn on the radio, and through the static, or out of a playlist of 10,000 songs on shuffle, their song plays. Not just a popular song, the obscure B-side track that they loved, the song you danced to at your wedding. Michael's dad was a classic rock junkie. Weeks after the funeral, Michael is driving, sobbing. He hits scan on the radio. The station doesn't land on the news or the weather. It lands on the opening chord of his dad's favorite Led Zeppelin track. Statistical probability says this could happen. Sure, but emotional probability? That is a precision strike. That is a message. But sometimes the message doesn't come through machines. It comes through nature. You've heard the saying, when cardinals appear, angels are near. It sounds like something you'd see on a greeting card. But let's look at the behavior. Animals operate on instinct, survival, flight or fight. They do not usually approach humans. They do not make prolonged eye contact. But people constantly report animals behaving wrong. A butterfly that lands on your shoulder and refuses to leave for 20 minutes. A bird that lands on the windowsill and stares, literally stares into your eyes with an intensity that feels human. It's not just the presence of the animal. It's the interruption of the natural order. It's the bird tapping on the glass. It's the dragonfly hovering at eye level. The belief here is that the spirit is not in the animal, but is momentarily influencing the animal's consciousness to get your attention. It's a wave, a hello, and finally there is the phenomenon of the find. Pennies, dimes, feathers. Finding money on the ground is common. But finding a shiny, mint-condition dime in the center of your pillow? Finding a penny in a shoe you haven't worn in 6 months? The pennies from heaven concept is rooted in the idea of value. I value you. Pay attention. It's small, it's easily dismissed. But when Carol, who lost her brother Dave, finds a dime every single time she has a panic attack, in the car, on the bathroom floor, in her purse, that stops being a coincidence. It becomes a language, a binary code of comfort. So where does this leave us? We live in a world that demands proof. We want peer-reviewed studies. We want data, and strictly speaking, science cannot prove that your grandmother is controlling the butterflies in your garden. Science deals with the repeatable. Grief deals with the singular. But here is the truth. If you are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and you find a feather, and that feather gives you the strength to take one more breath, then it is real. The function of the sign is not to convince a jury. The function is to heal a heart. It doesn't matter if it's physics, or psychology, or spirit. What matters is that for a split second, the veil lifted. The silence was broken, and you knew deep in your bones that love is the one thing that death cannot touch. You just have to look up. You have to notice. I want to know your story. I want to know the things you've seen that you were afraid to tell anyone else because you thought they'd think you were crazy. You aren't crazy. You're connected. Tell us in the comments below. Let's build a record of these moments. And if this made you feel something, if it reminded you of someone, hit that like button. It helps us get this message to people who are grieving right now. Keep your eyes open. The signs are there.